ketogenic diet or these things will do. They'll lower the blood sugar.
Like when they're not a problem.
If you keep your mitochondria healthy, it's very, very difficult to get cancer in the first place. You say, who the hell are all these people?
Hey everybody, we're here with Dr. Seyfried. We are super excited about this interview. Since cancer is such a big factor in all of our lives, everybody knows somebody who's had cancer for sure. And so, Dr. Seyfried, would you mind telling us about your background?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Nice to be here. Well, I'm a PhD. I've got my PhD in genetics, master's degree in genetics from Illinois State University with Dr. Herman Brockman. And then I got a PhD in genetics from the University of Illinois with the late Bill Daniel. And then I did postdoctoral work at Yale University in the Department of Neurology, where I studied epilepsy and glycolipid biochemistry. So I was there for 9 years, also on the faculty at Yale University School of Medicine. And then I've been at Boston College since 1985, pursuing my research in epilepsy, glycobiology, and cancer. But we've now really shifted almost completely over to the cancer issue. So this is now my primary research emphasis is on the management and prevention of cancer.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard about your background in epilepsy. I think the first time that I ever heard about ketogenic diets on epilepsy patients, it was kind of mind blown to me. You kind of don't believe it initially, but then you start hearing anecdotes of parents that change their kids' diets and they don't have any more seizures. And the Navy SEALs did a study on it, and then it's like, wow, that's so crazy. How was that? Is there a correlation there between you studying the ketogenesis pathways with epilepsy and starting to understand like nutrition, or how was that process for you in terms of like how nutrition has such a big impact in our health?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was at Yale, I was interested. I thought maybe ketogenic diet, because it was the ketogenic diet got its first fame with the management of epilepsy. In 1921, Wilder at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, was the first to test ketogenic diets on children. What he had studied was that water-only fasting could also manage seizures, but the problem is you can only do that for so long. And then he developed a diet that would replicate the biochemistry in the blood, so you could get a biochemical readout similar to water-only fasting, but you didn't have to starve yourself. So that was pretty powerful stuff. Dr. William Lennox had done some studies on this as well. He was a giant in the field of epilepsy research some years ago. And the mechanism by which a ketogenic diet would block epileptic seizures was never and still isn't fully understood. It works. It's something that really works well, but there's a lot of ideas about the mechanism by which it works. And when I was working on epilepsy, because that was the main focus at Yale University's Department of Neurology, we're one of the leading schools in the world on epilepsy, mechanisms of epilepsy. And what I began to realize in studying this was that blood glucose played a very important role. And then later, when we started to do research on ketogenic diets, we were able to show that the calorie restriction, which is like water-only fasting, or ketogenic diets were equally effective in blocking seizures. And then we were able to relate seizure protection directly to the levels of glucose in the blood. And this is what we were seeing, my physician colleagues were seeing in patients. You can have a child managed long-term for many months without a breakthrough seizure. And then, a drink of juice, a candy bar, a muffin, or whatever, would spike the glucose, and within a few minutes, the child would explode into a seizure. So whatever was involved, it was the maintenance of low steady glucose level in the blood seemed to be linked to protection. Now, elevation of ketones. So of course, a lot of people were interested in, what role do ketones play in managing epileptic seizures, and that's where a lot of the focus is continuing today. Is it the low glucose or is it the elevated ketones that are largely responsible for maintaining seizure, preventing breakthrough seizures and things like this? And the answer is that we're still not sure. There's a gamma butyric acid inhibitory neurotransmitter that's related to ketone metabolism. So there's a lot of things that could potentially be involved, but it seems like it's probably a combination of a number of things. But with respect to cancer, they're also where glucose, we and others have shown, we were the first group to show a direct relationship between how fast tumors would grow and the level of blood sugar. We have a much more clear understanding of how ketogenic metabolic therapy targets cancer than we do understanding how ketogenic metabolic therapy may manage epileptic seizures. So the epileptic seizure field will be wrestling with this for the next several decades. But we now know in the cancer field, we know pretty solidly what's going on.
That's great. And I can't wait to get into that. And before we go into that, for you personally, did you always understand, maybe the way that you grew up, that, or maybe your education, or maybe a personal journey, that diet could have such a big impact, or ketogenic diet, or low sugar diet, or whatever, that had such an impact in our health? For me, as a physician, I actually didn't think that, is it just crazy to think now, because my practice is so different, but like, when I first started my career, we never were taught about this in medical school. It just didn't click that much,
Yeah. Well, as far as, I'm not recognized for my work on diet. Diet's a very ambiguous thing. We can achieve great health with the appropriate diet, but it's so ambiguous. What might work for one person may not be effective for another person. We were interested in the molecular mechanism of action. We're interested in knowing how to kill tumor cells without harming the body.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's where our thrust of energy comes to. Now, of course, if you know how to use the diet as a tool, or diet itself as medicine, you need to know that. But more importantly, you need to know that the tumor cells can't live without the sugar, glucose, and the amino acid glutamine. And so many people are confused when I tell them this, that it's not only the sugar, the glutamine, but you cannot manage glutamine with diet. You have to target the glutamine to kill cancer cells. You can't. There's no diet. Exercise can lower a little bit of glutamine, but you need drugs, and that's what we're working on, the drugs to target the glutamine. All these people say, how do I lower glutamine from diet? Well, let me tell you, you can't. Okay?
Got it.
You can't do that, because glutamine is the number one metabolite in our bloodstream. We make a buttload of it, and there's no diet that's going to be low enough to kill a cancer cell by lowering glutamine. Yes, for glucose, for sure, but not for glutamine. You need drugs, and we know the drugs to target glutamine. We know them. You can't do it with diet alone. You got to do it with a drug. The tumor cell can't survive without glucose and glutamine, and the diet's not going to help you with the glutamine to any great extent. You need a drug.
Got it. And so whenever you were starting down this pathway, where was the first researcher that kind of looked into this, into how glutamine and glucose impact the biology of cancer cells?
Well, I'll keep using these terms, it turns out many people in the cancer metabolism field know that glutamine is a powerful driver of cancer cells. People just know that. If you take cancer cells and put them in a culture dish, they can't grow very well without glucose and glutamine. So if you take away glucose and glutamine, most cancer cells will die. Now, what we did just recently, to look at that in brain cancer, uh, what we have, the paper was recently published and is getting a lot of recognition. Um, what we take cells and we put them in a culture dish. Now, of course, we're interrogating what a tumor cell needs to have to survive.
And what type of
When you
cancer was this?
is a glioblastoma,
Oh, glioblastomas. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
hormone cancers.
brain
Yeah,
cancer. But it works. The same thing can be said for almost every cancer. They're all similar in their dependency on these fuels. And of course, our job was to figure out the mechanism. What makes these fuels so important for the continued survival and growth of a tumor cell? Well, glutamine is an amino acid. And glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in our body. It's higher than any of the other amino acids. Um, but the tumor cells use this amino acid just as well as our gut and our immune system. So we have to recognize the importance of glutamine as an incredibly important metabolite for the health and vitality of our normal cells in our body, our normal
right.
physiological function. But so, how do we know that? Well, we take the tumor cells and we put them in saline solution, which is just simply a buffered salt, which has nothing. And then you time and see how long it takes for all of the tumor cells that you put in the dish to die. Okay. So, in other words, you're starving them of everything. You just put them in the dish, no food, no serum, nothing. And you see, okay, great. What happens to them? Yes, they die. There's nothing for them to eat, and they're going to die. Without energy, everything dies. All right. So you just say, okay, they're all died in 24 hours. All these cells are dead. Okay. So if we add back with in the buffered solution, each individual amino acid by itself and see what it does to the survival of the tumor cells. Um, every amino acid has a little bit of a bump. It causes the cell to survive just a few minutes longer or just a little bit longer. But then when you hit glutamine, boom, the cells clearly perk up and they live much longer than any of the other amino acids. So clearly, glutamine is this. Now, many people in the cancer metabolism field have recognized this, and they say many metastatic cancers are what they call glutamine addicted. They can't even grow without the glutamine. So it's called glutamine addiction, and it's many scientific papers discussing this from some of the top labs in the world about the importance of glutamine. Now, what we have now, listen to this. Our immune system consists of T cells, B cells, macrophages, leukocytes, natural killer cells, all these different kinds of cells. It was known in biology that the immune system, a normal immune system needs glutamine. Okay, our normal immune cells are also glutamine hogs. To do to fight bacteria, to fix wounds, to do the normal maintenance of our body. Our immune cells also use glutamine, and the glutamine in our blood is very high, so it supports everything. Our gut, our intestinal tract, gut uses tremendous amounts of glutamine. The urea cycle uses glutamine. Glutamine is like a it's called a non-essential amino acid because the body can make it from glucose, but in a sense, it's a very essential amino acid for so many different functions. So what we found many years ago is that all metastatic cancers are derived in one way or another from immune cells, especially macrophages. So when we look at the biology of macrophages, we know from the work of the Newscombs in Oxford, England, and others that immune cells are really heavily dependent on glutamine. And the metastatic cells of all major cancers, whether it's breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer, they're all part of macrophages. So you know that the metastatic cancer is going to be strongly dependent on the availability of glutamine. But you can't go in and remove glutamine because you're going to paralyze and hurt our normal immune cells that also need the same metabolite. So this is where we developed the press pulse therapeutic strategy, where glucose is a non-essential amino acid, but the tumor cells need glucose as well. Glucose is a non-essential metabolite, okay? And we can push glucose down really, really low. but you can't do that to glutamine without harming your body significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So then we developed the pulsing. So once you get a chokehold on the glucose, you come in with the pulsing of the glutamine, and diets aren't going to do this. The diet is great to lower the glucose, but the diet ain't going to lower that glutamine. So you got to come in and pulse the glutamine with drugs. And we found the Don drug, 6-deoxynorlucine, is the most powerful glutamine inhibitor that we know of.
And so when you
It's
say
not
pulse
available.
it, when you say pulse it biochemically, what it's doing is just, does it attach it to, and it makes it into an inactive metabolite, or what does it
No,
do?
no. No, that's not correct. Not. Let me say, pulsing is when you give a small amount of the drug for a short period of time and then take it away.
Got it.
Okay, that's pulsing, as opposed to pressing. You can press and hold down glucose over long periods of time, and that's what a water-only fasting or a calorie-restricted ketogenic diet or these things will do. They'll lower the blood sugar, and you can keep the blood sugar down because your body can switch to ketone bodies and
Mm-hmm.
fatty acids. They don't need that sugar. So we
Mm-hmm.
can choke hold the sugar by
Mm-hmm.
pressing it, press. But that
Mm-hmm.
you can't press glutamine because you're going to harm your immune system, you're going to harm your gut, you're going to harm everything. So you have to pulse. So you come in with a drug, a small dosage at a critical time, and pull it right away. And that kills the tumor cell, but does not kill the immune cell. So the immune cells are paralyzed, but they're not killed by targeting glutamine. So you pulse, you kill the tumor cell, but then you take that drug off because you need your immune system to pick up the dead corpses from the tumor cells that are killed. So you have to know, you put the chokehold on the glucose and you come in and you pulse the glutamine with a drug. And that's together, you destroy your tumor cell without toxic, your cancer without toxicity. And then you transition the whole body over to ketones and fatty acids because the tumor cells can't burn fatty acids and ketones. So they're trapped because they have abnormal mitochondria. You need a good mitochondria to metabolize fatty acids and ketone bodies. And all major cancers have defective mitochondria, oxidative phosphorylation. So you know how to trap them. Checkmate. That's it. So, and unfortunately, you guys in the medical community, you never got any training on diet, like you said,
Yeah.
and you never got training on how to use food as medicine, and they don't train people to know that cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disease, not a genetic disease. So consequently, we have all these oncologists that are really not trained or really understand what the nature of the biological problem is.
I agree with you. I think it probably, if I asked a lot of my colleagues, oncologists, what the biological process, whether a tumor cell has an abnormal mitochondria or not, whether a tumor cells, what is it using as fuel? I guarantee you probably I didn't know until you just told me right now, and so I think it is very, very, very. I mean, we've been going down this pathway and we got to make a right turn. I mean, it seems like we have to really start diving into how to be able to put it all together. And so when you're saying metabolic therapy,
Yeah.
that I've heard you say that term, is a combination of things I'm hearing. It's a combination of drugs. It's a combination of probably dietary approaches. All of it has to come together. It seems like to starve. It's like war. You really wanna starve your opponents of everything and hit him everywhere you can, right?
Yeah, well, that's true. And what we've learned from Warburg and our own work, energy is everything. Without energy, nothing can live. So where does the tumor cell get its energy from? How is this cell able to get energy? And we have clearly shown that it's the metabolism of these two fuels through the glycolysis pathway in the cytoplasm and in the glutaminolysis pathway in the mitochondria. We have actually shown the two pathways that are driving the dysregulated growth of these tumor cells. That's why we know that what we have to do to kill them. And it's not as complicated as people make it out to be. So the question is, why is that? Why does your profession not know what I am saying? And one of the reasons is that when you go to medical school, you are told that cancer is a genetic disease. You are not told that cancer is a metabolic disorder. So people are chasing genes and they're looking at all the mutations that you see in these tumor cells. And then you develop these extremely expensive and toxic drugs to target the so-called abnormal mutations. But if cancer is not a genetic disease, most of that stuff is not going to be as a long-term solution to the problem. So consequently, in this country today, we have almost 1,700 people dying each day from cancer, which comes to about 70 people per hour are dying from cancer. And it's getting worse and worse, and it's affecting younger and younger people, and they keep chasing genes, doing all this genetic stuff, which is largely irrelevant and wasted time. The cancer cell cannot live without glucose and glutamine and cannot switch to fatty acids and ketone bodies. Bang, there it is. Now, people will say, oh, that's too simple. It can't be that simple. Well, it's not quite as simple as I'm making it out to be, but it certainly isn't as complicated as spending hundreds of millions of dollars targeting genes that are downstream epiphenomena. They're the effect of the dysregulated growth, not the cause of the dysregulated growth. It's unbelievable.
So all cancer cells, all of them, have abnormal mitochondria.
I haven't yet found any tumor that has normal mitochondria. So I published a big paper on this in iScience. I went through all of the major cancers. I had to go back and dig up all these electron microscopic pathology reports from the 60s and the 70s and sometimes even earlier, and look at the mitochondria under the electron microscope. Now, I just had to go back to the library and get the journal articles and then look at what those guys were showing. And the mitochondria are empty. They have breakdown of cristae, and then they have a lot of lipid droplets appearing in the cytoplasm. So I just published a recent paper. It appears that if your mitochondria are defective, the mitochondria cannot use fatty acids. And what happens, the fatty acids accumulate in the cytoplasm as lipid droplets. So when you look under the microscope, electron microscopy in cancer mostly, you see mitochondria that are abnormal in number and structure, and all of these lipid droplets in the cytoplasm. They're stored in the cytoplasm because they can't be burned in the mitochondria. Mitochondria are defective. So I found
it's like a microscopic version of fatty liver disease.
Yes, exactly. It's very similar to that. Lipid droplets, because in fatty liver disease, the mitochondria are also not working well. So, but we see now there's different reasons for why the mitochondria are working, and that's interesting because we found that all provocative cancer agents, whether they're carcinogens, whether it's hypoxia, whether it's oncogenic viruses, radiation, intermittent chronic inflammation, all of those conditions chronically damage the ability of the mitochondria to use energy from oxygen, consequently leading to a shift to using energy without oxygen, which is fermentation. And then you say, oh, okay, what are the fuels that are driving this fermentation? And we interrogated all this stuff, and it's only glucose and glutamine that are the drivers of this fermentation energy without oxygen. So now you say, oh, if that's the case, to manage cancer effectively, all we have to do is take patients, reduce their blood sugar down real low, healthy low, and then you come in, transition the whole body off to fatty acids and ketones, which the normal cells can burn and we can be healthy, but the tumor cells can't. And then you come in with the glutamine targeting drug and knock them out. So it's not that complicated, right?
Oh man, that is something that's interesting. And so, what is the point at which a cell? Let's say I'm a regular cell in the body, and I'm going about my life, and I'm having any one of the cancer triggers like what you're talking about, and it's either an endocrine disruptor, an oncogenic virus, a radiation, a mutation, and then what happens then that my mitochondria? What is happening that my mitochondria has to become defective to cope with it? Or
yeah. So what happens is the mitochondria control the destiny of our cells. The mitochondria control the destiny of our very existence on the planet. When the mitochondria in our bodies run out of energy, we die. Okay, and human beings, if you can make 100 like the late Jimmy Carter, we have this big ceremony for him today. 100 years old is a pretty old guy. Right?
Yeah.
But we don't have human beings living to be 150 years of age. You don't. I mean, the oldest person that ever lived was Madame Clement from France. I think she was 122. That was the longest any human being has ever survived on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lifespan. Elephants have a lifespan. Dogs and cats, all these animals have different lifespans, which is dictated in large part by the mitochondria of those organisms. So, so we know that our existence on the planet depends on the efficiency and function of the mitochondria, and that gives us energy. And with energy, we can live. So we know this. But as you said, what is it that triggers cancer from damage to mitochondria? Well, let me tell you, if you have a heart attack, a cardiovascular event, all you fall down because you're no longer breathing because your heart stopped pumping blood. And if you look at the patient, of course, if you don't massage his heart, give him press compression and whatever, he's going to be dead. So you got to get that heart beating again, so he can live. Now listen to this: if you look at a person who's just had a heart attack, their blood, if you take a sample of the blood, it's filled with lactic acid and succinic acid.
Mm-hmm.
This is known. All heart attack patients have these two fuels immediately increase in the bloodstream. Okay, why is that? Because our mitochondria oxygen consumption has stopped, but
Mm-hmm.
we have a second default energy state, which is fermentation. And the fuels for fermentation are the sugar in the blood and the amino acid glutamine. Now, these two in normal cells will burn these same two fuels to allow the cell to stay alive for what? How long can you live with a heart? Maybe 5 minutes if you don't get oxygen back in, and then your brain dies and you're dead. But if you can get the oxygen back, all of a sudden lactic acid and succinic acid disappear because you're breathing again. Now, and you don't need fermentation. You don't need to get energy from fuels that can give you energy without oxygen, which is called fermentation, lactic acid fermentation and succinic acid fermentation. So they build up in the blood because we're not breathing. We're not using oxygen. As soon as we use oxygen, they disappear real quick. Um, if we don't do that, we're going to be dead from brain damage. So the cancer cell is always locked into producing lactic acid and succinic acid because its mitochondria is permanently damaged, even in the presence of oxygen. This is what Warburg showed out of Warburg many years ago. So he showed cancer cells continue to produce these fermentation waste products, even in the presence of 100% oxygen. What's going on here?
Wow.
And that's because they have permanent structural damage in the mitochondria. Now, that doesn't happen quickly. The heart attack is quick. Cancer cells acquire that damage from chronic insults to that organelle over time. Now, what could that be? Constant exposure to a carcinogen. Carcinogen comes into the mitochondria, doesn't knock it out right away, just impairs its ability to function normally. But the continued exposure to that chemical carcinogen eventually causes the cell to switch to a fermentation. Now, here's what's interesting. The mitochondria is telling the nucleus of the cell to do its normal function. However, if the oxygen coming into the cell is not being used for energy, something is happening in the mitochondria efficiency. The mitochondria signals the nucleus. It's like picks up a phone immediately, calls the nucleus, and says, open the floodgates for the glucose and the glutamine on the surface of the membranes. And that's an oncogene. So the oncogene turns on, and all of a sudden, the surface of the cell starts to bring in more and more glucose and glutamine. And when this happens, the mitochondria lose control of the destiny of the cell, and the cell falls back on ancient fermentation pathways that existed in all biological cells before oxygen came into the atmosphere 2.5 billion years ago. Now, the only way you can understand what I am saying is you have to really understand biological evolution. There's another gap in our medical establishment. Half the people have no clue about biological evolution.
Yeah.
If you don't understand, you might as well be speaking in a foreign language. The brain must understand, it must have some level of scientific literacy to understand what the hell I'm talking about. But biological evolution, we emerged as single cell organisms on this planet. That's who we are, single cell organisms. And we came in an environment where there was no oxygen in the atmosphere. Only certain bacteria were able eventually to produce oxygen. And then there was a fusion, a symbiosis between two organisms that allowed us to develop multicellular organisms, which eventually leads to all eukaryotic multicellular organisms, where we have a division of labor. We have a mitochondria in the cytoplasm that used to be a separate organism in a cytoplasm of another cell that could ferment. So the two organisms together in the same cytoplasm have a division of labor for energy. And that energy is the mitochondria is so energy efficient. But if it becomes impaired, it falls back on this ancient pathway that existed before oxygen came into the planet. So it's still there. The glycolysis pathway is an ancient pathway. The glutaminolysis path, these are ancient pathways. So our big finding recently was that Warburg always knew that the tumor cells were fermenting glucose. He did not know about glutamine fermentation. So we have now found a second fuel, not respired with oxygen, but fermented just like the glucose. Now we know the two fuels driving the beast. We know how to stop it. We know how to manage it. The problem is what I am telling you right now cannot be, for whatever reason, cannot be understood, cannot be believed, or even appreciated for a variety of reasons. Some of them are confirmation bias, like, oh, everybody knows cancer is a genetic disease. What the hell am I talking about? How could I be right when the whole world thinks it's something other than that? The world is wrong. It's not a genetic disease, period. We got 1,700 people a day dying from this misunderstanding. Once you understand it's a metabolic disease, then you're going to have clear strategies on how to manage this disease without toxicity. So we just published a big paper. I don't know, people not reading this stuff. They keep asking me all these goddamn questions, and the answers are in the damn papers. They don't read the papers. What are you supposed to do?
Oh my goodness, that's so crazy. In your first paper in 2012, it is so crazy that it's sitting underneath us.
Yes.
That the knowledge is right there. Is right there. I mean that's crazy.
I know, it's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, go ask your friends and go down to whatever oncology center you have down there. They never heard that glucose is a driver of dysregulated cancer cell growth. No. Oh, no, glucose is fine. Eat Infamil. Oh, what, you killing me? You take poison. It's like, give me a break. We got 1,700 people a day, and they're suffering. It's not like, whoa.
Right.
A heart attack is great, man. You have a heart attack, boom, you're dead. You don't have to worry about anything. These poor cancer patients are surgically mutilated. They're burned. They're poisoned. I mean, give me a break. Now, here's the thing. With metabolic therapy, we can still use many of the procedures that are being used in oncology clinics, but we would use them in a very, very different way, much lower dosages, much different timing. So we would constantly reduce the toxicity associated with all these things.
Yeah, because as I'm seeing, like as you're saying all of this right now, if somebody has cancer, then we have this arsenal, right? Somebody comes in, we find a tumor with an image that was probably done 10 years later than what it really should have been done, but we find this big tumor. Oh, long and behold, you got cancer. You had cancer 14 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 3 years ago. We just didn't see it. And so now then we go with we try to cut it out. We have radiation, surgery, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and so all those four things. But as the knowledge base that you're putting out into the world comes into clinical practice, and as the practice, I think, of being able to detect with things like the Grail test, with full body MRIs, things very, very early, like when they're not a problem. And then it's so much better to be able to then I'm understanding better the metabolic therapy thing, because it's not just like change your diet. There is more to it, and there is pharmaceutical therapeutics that would go along with a transition in fuel source, really, of the body. And then, like what you're saying, then surgery, then radiation, then chemotherapy, then immunotherapy, if those things. But in theory, if we had a full body MRI of everybody before these things turn into a mass, and if what you're putting out into the world is correct, which it is many ways, because you've put out so much science for 20 years now, more 20 plus, right?
Yeah.
Then like the whole thing has to change of how we approach this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we know is that, and we developed the glucose ketone index calculator to allow cancer patients to know what it does is it measures the ratio in millimolar. That's the same mass concentration in a volume. Um, Ketones in millimolar and glucose in millimolar, and then you bring that down to a low number. So most people in our society today eating highly processed foods with high carbohydrate content have a very, very high GKI, which means that the glucose level in the blood is massively higher than the ketone level in the blood. But
Mm-hmm.
when you do water only fasting, restricted ketogenic diets, just even vegan diets, carnivore diets, pescatarian diets, whatever you do, you eat tiny amounts of it. And then all of a sudden, the glucose ketone index comes down. And when you get in the zone of 2.0 or below in that ratio, which we published, again, it's in the literature, um, this tumor cells start to get hammered. They start to up and die. They slow down. The inflammation in the tumor microenvironment becomes much, much, much less. There's death signaling, killing tumor cells, inflammation, angiogenesis, the abnormal vascularization. This is, we use these terrible drugs on people like Avastin. Oh my God, what a terrible, terrible drug. It's called bevacizumab. They call it Avastin. It's supposed to target the blood vessels in the tumor. You can do that by bringing your glucose ketone index down. You can target the blood vessels. We already showed all this stuff. So it doesn't cost much money, right? Avastin is extremely expensive to do that, whereas you could do the same thing with getting a low GKI. Once the patient is in a low GKI, which could take 14 to 20 days, which is okay, and then the inflammation, the tumor cells start to die, everything starts to get down. It's much less angry in the microenvironment. Okay, then you come in with the parasite medications, and you come in with the glutamine targeting drug, and you start slaughtering these damn tumor cells. And just like you said, you could come in with a small dose of radiation, a little bit of chemo at the end, or a little bit of immunotherapy at the end. It's like the finishing touch to
Right.
get rid of the surviving cells. You don't come in like a bull in a china shop and go after this tumor with things that aren't going after the energy source of the cells. So you're 100% correct. The whole process has to be reevaluated and done the correct way if you want to improve quality of life and overall survival. If
Right.
people are interested in improving quality of life and overall survival, the system must change. And
Right.
it should change fast because we're 1,700 people a day are dying from this.
Exactly. Exactly. It needs to be fast. I interviewed actually Dorian, the guy who came up with the keto mojo.
Yeah,
In his whole process, he was type 2 diabetic.
yeah,
Diabetes goes away when he goes into the ketogenic diet. He comes up with the glucose meter, I mean, the ketone meter.
yeah,
And he's actually surprisingly the only one in the market
yeah.
when,
Well, no, there's another one. Well, Dorian came to me. He wanted to patent the GKI from me. I can't patent. We couldn't patent it. So it turns out patent attorney you don't patent a formula. I developed the formula. We here at Boston College developed the formula, but we couldn't make any money on it. So
you can
Dorian,
you cannot patent a formula?
no, it's crazy. So Dorian ran with it. He wanted to patent it from Boston College, and we went over to the patent office. Oh no, you can't patent a formula. So he said, "Oh, can I use it?" I said, "Yeah, be my guest, use it." Now he's making all the money on the Keto Mojo meters, but and everybody thinks I'm making money. No, I get all our research comes from philanthropy. All of our
Yeah.
support comes from private foundation and philanthropy. So we have a number of really good people that are interested in helping save the lives of thousands of people, knowing that we can do that. So they just want to be part of it. And then when we publish these papers, that's why if you look at my publications on open
Right.
access, which anybody who has a computer can go on the web and look at them, you say, who the hell are all these people? In the acknowledgement section. Well, those
Yeah.
are the guys giving us the money to do what we need to do.
Right.
They're the philanthropists and the foundation people.
I
So
think, when you're telling me all of this, I mean, I think there is like one issue, right? Um, if my colleague as an oncologist gets a 4-stage cancer, lung cancer, the lady's already dying, like what else they got, right? It's almost like if you're in war and you already have a SWAT team inside of your house, like all you got to do is like, all you got left is a grenade, you know,
Yeah.
and run out the back door if you can. And so it's like, and so it's very similar. Like I think currently, like today, what is an oncologist, what is their toolbox? Like if they go into a stage 4 lung cancer patient and tell them, look, all we got to do is change your ketone index. And, you know, first of all, they're probably going to like start, like, people are going to start questioning their license, and it's brutal, right? I mean, it's just
That's right.
brutal. They'll take your license away,
Yeah,
even if they read your papers.
I
Even
know.
if they read your papers.
Well, this is the problem.
And the
Yeah,
data's there, right?
yeah, well, this is the problem, because the medical establishment itself has written the cancer standard of care in granite. It's not able
Right.
to be changed.
Right.
A standard of care should always be flexible in adapting to the new information that comes along. Uh, uh, but it's not. And I know a lot of good MDs, physicians that really want to do metabolic therapy, and they're prevented from doing this for fear of losing their license because it has not been sanctioned by the medical establishment. So, yeah, you go to the hospitals, and so the question is, and we keep publishing in good quality science journals for our colleagues, scientific and MD colleagues, and they know what we're talking about, but they always say, oh, you got to do another experiment. You got to do it. But we know what enough to do to keep people alive. We should be doing that, and then perfecting it as we go forward. And I have to be. We don't want to tell people that are in hospice, oh, we have the solution to bring you out of hospice. When you're in hospice,
Right.
the system has already run its course. You know, we see a number of people that have stage 4 cancer. They're diagnosed with, but they feel pretty good. I didn't know I had such a big problem.
Right.
Those are the guys. You hit those guys up front with the metabolic therapy and bring that whole thing under control. And then when it's shrunken down, you could use a small dose of radiation or even a surgical procedure and get rid of it. There's a lot of ways we can manage stage 4 cancers if you get it up front with the metabolic therapy. The problem is if you start poisoning these poor people, surgically mutilating them, the cancer spreads through the damn body because you've created a wound that actually cultivates the growth of these damn tumor cells. So because they're macrophages, and macrophages get all fired up when you have inflammation in the body. So we're doing everything wrong. We're not doing it the right way. Now, I'm not saying we don't use radiation and surgery and chemo and immunotherapy, but we use it in a very different way at a different time and a different dosage.
Yeah.
But let's bring the beast under control in a dormant state, and then come in and finish it off with some of these other things. We got everything backwards. We're coming after these tumors like a bullet. Get that, give you the toxic poison, surgically mutilate you, and the next thing you know, the poor person is, oh, he survives for a while, and I'm battling it, came back. Oh, it came back. Oh, it came back. It shouldn't come back. When you hit it up front with metabolic therapy and then go after it like that, I'm not saying we can cure cancer. All I'm saying is we can give these people a lot more opportunity to live longer. If they are cured, there you go. That's great. But they still live on the planet longer than they would have if they did something different. That's our plan. That's our plan.
And so I'm looking at the paper, I think it was in 2012, right? The paper you published on the cancer is a metabolic disease. I forget the title of it.
That was 2010, and then I wrote my book, Cancer is the book from Wiley Press on cancer as a metabolic disease.
Cancer is a metabolic disease.
Yeah, then from that, we started publishing in scientific journals the evidence to support what we had already published.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we developed the press pulse therapeutic strategy that I just told you about. You press the glucose, you pulse the glutamine, and that becomes and then our biggest paper just came out a month ago, less than a month ago, an actual protocol treatment with many MDs and PhDs as co-authors on our paper, which is really a how-to toolbox strategy. Okay, what do? I got a glioblastoma. How do I manage this?
Right.
Or the same strategy can be used for lung cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer. So all of the cancer cells have the same basic problem. They can't live without glucose and glutamine. and they can't burn ketones or fatty acids. So all the cancers are basically very, very similar biologically and biochemically. So one strategy would work against all these different tumors.
And so then when you already had the insight, okay, this is a metabolic disease, completely different paradigm shift of what we've been taught and think that we understand. And then from there in mice, you saw, what is it that you saw in mice or in rats that led you to think we can actually start? I mean, you mentioned the glutamine experiment where you tried each one of the amino acids, and then the glutamate was the only one that shut up the cancer growth.
Glutamine.
Glutamine, yeah.
Yeah, glutamine.
Glutamine. And the
Yeah.
glucose. And then, but then how did that translate into, like, did you explaining for everybody, how did that translate into, like, did the mice have cancer, and did you test half of them with this and half of them with that?
Yeah, so that's we started targeting glucose and glutamine in vivo in mice that had metastatic cancer and living animals, not in the dish.
Right.
You can't really ferret out mechanisms clearly in an angry growing tumor in the body because there's a lot of cells, a lot of inflammation, a lot of stuff, dead cells, living cells, proliferative cells, all these fibroblasts, macrophages, all kinds of cells in this living and growing tumor. So you have to be able to take the cells out of the tumor and then interrogate them in different environments in vitro, and then you find out what ultimately they need to survive, and then you go back in vivo in the living thing, and then you target those two fuels, and you see, oh my God, this thing is so. And as I said, we saw the shrinkage of abnormal blood vessels, which is called anti-angiogenesis. We saw a big shutdown of inflammation, NF-kappa B driven inflammation.
And inflammation, you're saying the decrease in CRP levels, ESR levels. How did you measure that?
CRP is a blood marker for systemic inflammation. Normally, like if you have type 2 diabetes or obesity or this, you oftentimes see high levels of CRP in your bloodstream. Right. Now, when we do ketogenic metabolic therapy, those markers go down. C-reactive protein goes down, insulin goes down, glucose goes down. A lot of these biomarkers that are telling you you're unhealthy, or you start to becoming healthy. So that's also, you're starving now. These tumor cells, they're getting beat up on this. So then you shrink it down. You can do non-invasive imaging like MRI, PET scans, CAT scans, and you can see what you thought was there now becomes smaller and sometimes goes away completely. So you have then many options to say, oh, it went away. What are we going to do? It went away. What are we going to do? Or it was there, but now it's much, much smaller. Okay, now the surgeon can say, oh, I can take that out now real quick without any collateral damage to the surrounding tissue. Wow, that's great. So, and that's what we're trying to emphasize here. If you can get rid of it completely, that's wonderful. But if it doesn't go away completely, then you have these other strategies that you can add on to shrink it down and take it away.
And when you were looking at rats, let's say mice, when you were looking at mice, let's say like out of 10 mice with end stage or stage 4, and what type of cancer was it, and then how many of them roughly like had a good response to what is being called, what you guys are naming pressing and
yeah. Okay, so every one of them had a good response, but we were never able to cure any of them. Okay, so when you say we have to realize in cancer, you talk about progression-free survival and you talk about overall survival. Okay. Mm-hmm. We were able to improve significantly progression-free survival and overall survival relative to those animals that were not given the metabolic therapy. So the guys not getting the metabolic therapy became full of metastatic cancer and they died relatively quickly after the tumor grew and spread. But the animals getting the treatment, which is the cocktail of diet drug combination, we were able to keep them alive massively longer than the guys that were not treated. But we are on the cutting edge of the press pulse therapeutic strategy requires a perfection of dosage, timing, and scheduling. which we will eventually have to deal with in the clinic with humans, because
Right.
it's the what time, how much do you give at that point, when do you give it, and schedule it with the diet and do all these other kinds of things, so to maximize the therapeutic benefit of what you're doing.
Yeah,
So
and the delivery of it.
yes, yes, how it's delivered, how what the dosage, the timing, the scheduling, all of this kind of stuff will
Yeah.
constantly improve overall survival longer and longer and longer once you begin to know the perfect. Now, I always tell when you go to NIH to get grants, they're not interested in dosage, timing, and scheduling. That's not sexy science. But that's ultimately what's going to manage the disease. Ultimately, you're gonna once you understand the proper dose, timing, and scheduling for diet drug combinations, you're going to keep these people alive a hell of a lot longer. Oh, but that's not sexy science, but it works. That's what's ultimately going to manage the problem. So that's what's always funny to me too, because they always like to know, oh, what gene is turned on, what's the molecular mechanism of this and that. I says, we got 1,700 people dying in the clinics, and you're worried about that kind of stuff. We know how to manage the disease. All we have to do is perfect dosage, timing, and scheduling. And now we have humans that are doing really, really well. Now our guy
That's what I was
Pablo,
going to ask you. Yeah.
yeah, we publish these things, individual case reports on humans. We got people that had stage 4 cancer spread to the lungs, to the brain, all over the body, and they're still alive. They went into a metabolic state. How long are they going to live? I don't know, but they're living a hell of a lot longer than they would
But they're
have.
not
And
doing they're not doing the pharmaceutical. They're just doing the ketogenic part. They're not doing the pharmaceutical targeting of the glutamine inhibition, right?
Most of them aren't. They're just doing the glucose targeting. So we always felt if they did the glutamine targeting on top, that it would happen a lot quicker and be a lot more effective. But the key drug, Don, is not allowed to be used. This is nuts. If I had cancer, I know where to get it, and I would take it myself for sure. But poor guys like you and others,
So
you guys are out.
so why is it not being able to use? I mean,
Well, here's the
it
thing.
is a complex.
Yeah, well, they said they used it on little kids and cancer patients in the past. There was plenty of literature on this drug, but they felt that it wasn't as effective as it could be, and its level of toxicity was similar to that of other toxic, like Red Devil, doxorubicin, and all these other terrible chemicals they used. So they felt it wasn't any better. It was off patent. You can't make any money on it. So, but we found a way to keep the power of that drug there and remove the toxicity from that drug, which now makes it extremely valuable. But we can't use it because they feel that it's off. You can't make money on it.
But you can patent that next modification, right?
Well,
You
that's
can,
what Johns Hopkins is trying to do. They're trying to modify the structure of Don, but these guys, they want to make money on the drug. And if you use the drug alone by itself, you do get some therapeutic benefit. But you got to put that patient in nutritional ketosis to get the real power of what that drug is going to do. And they don't want to do that because they told me, not the different drug companies said, I said, your drug will work a lot better if you can get your patient in nutritional ketosis. Oh, we sorry, we can't do that because we won't know if that patient does really well. We won't know if it's our drug or the nutritional ketosis that was responsible for the success. I said, who cares? The patient's living. They're not interested in that. They want to make the money on the drug.
yeah.
So, so you're up against that whole industry too. I mean,
Yeah.
the revenue generation.
Yeah.
Our goal is very simple. How long can we keep people diagnosed with cancer alive and a higher quality of life for far longer than would have been expected? That's all.
Yeah.
And that's success. That's success in and of. What do you have to make all this money on this stuff? Just say people are living longer. They're doing better. Okay, great. That tells us we're on the right track.
Yeah. And so then are there in the future, do you see a future where you're going to start using the new version of this glutamine? You're calling it DON, right?
DON, yeah, but it's
D-
only an acronym for 6-deoxynorleucine. It's a molecule that looks just like glutamine, but it's not glutamine,
Got
and it
it.
blocks the glutamine pathway. And it was isolated from a bacteria, from a plant, some sort of bacteria it was isolated from. So it's like an antibiotic of some sort.
Got
Um,
it.
and it was used on the kids. It was used on little kids with leukemia. It's not like it's never been used on people before. It's just there. But the pharmaceutical companies, you can't get it. So you just can't go. You can't get it. It's just not available. So, and the drug companies all know about this. Believe me, they're all trying to modify it in
Right.
some way to keep its and we're all interested in the same thing. How do you modify this drug so that it contains that it has retains its powerful therapeutic benefit and doesn't have the toxicity. And one of the ways to do that is you put your patients in nutritional ketosis, which now you don't need nearly as the concentration of DON, and you get a very powerful therapeutic effect with a lower concentration, thereby reduced toxicity. But the
Yeah.
problem is you can't get DON. You can't, it's not available.
And localized delivery too, like delivering it directly into where the
It's better to deliver it with intravenous, like a port.
Got it.
We
Got
do
it.
it. We do an IP, intraperitoneal, which is like a port. It doesn't work as well oral because the stomach acid breaks it down.
Got
So
it.
that's why the pharmaceutical companies are trying to make derivatives of DON that can be acid resistant in the stomach, and they allow that to get into the bloodstream a little bit better. There's a lot of variations that are being worked out. And there's
Yeah.
other glutamine inhibiting drugs as well.
So I was gonna
But
ask you, yeah.
none of them seem to work as well because DON is what we call a dirty drug. And a dirty drug hits multiple targets simultaneously. So if you want to patent a drug, generally you have a drug at a very specific kind of a target, and that's so unique. I got that. But glutamine targeting is very ambiguous. There's a lot of transporters for glutamine, different enzymes. DON hits them all. DON hits them all. So, and that's why it works so well. But you can't make money on it.
Yeah.
So you're up against. But people want to live, man. The only way we're gonna change this system is there has to be a mass outcry on the part of the population. People
Yeah.
are just have to walk into these damn oncology centers. I want metabolic therapy. I want metabolic therapy.
Exactly.
And the guy
Exactly.
who can, yeah. And then the doctors who know how to administer metabolic therapy can set up clinics, train physicians, and know exactly.
Right.
And this is what we're trying to do now. We're trying to train physicians. We're trying to work with people to do this. But of
Yeah.
course, it takes money. And most of the money that's being raised for cancer research is thrown about the same stupid stuff they've been doing for decades, targeting gene mutations. And, immunotherapies are based on the somatic mutation theory of cancer. The somatic mutation theory says that cancer is caused by gene mutations. So when you look at immunotherapies, yes, they do work well for a number of people. Yes, they do. But they also have no effect on large numbers of people. And some of them cause hyperprogressive disease. This is where the drug kills you faster than the cancer does. So those precision medicines all of a sudden see a marker on a normal cell that's not part of the cancer, not part of the tumor, and they attack and blow out your liver and blow out your kidneys. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it certainly happens to enough people to say. And that's why these drug companies aren't hiding anything. If you go at night, listen to the TV commercials on Opdivo and Keytruda, they spend more time telling you how the damn drug is going to kill you than how it's going to help you. But they're not hiding anything. They're telling you right up, this drug can kill you. Well, what the hell are you taking anything that has a remote possibility of killing you? Because they're all looking for that shot. Oh, but it's the 20% of people that do really well. I said, well, listen, metabolic therapy is certainly not going to kill you. That's one thing. It's only going to make you healthier. So, and that's what we've seen over and over again. But, it's a work in progress. It is definitely a paradigm shift. It will happen because it's based on hard science more so than any other strategy out there. So it's going to take time for the public to know, for the hospitals and the scientists and the oncologists. They all have to be retrained. They have to know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, we don't make any progress.
Yeah, because it almost seems like the approach is probably going to be almost like Dr. Ornish did with the heart disease, where it's going to take so much time, so many case reports that then start compiling data and then understanding, okay, patients that don't go to, same like with functional medicine, patients that don't go to metabolic therapy, they do horrible compared to patients that do. And then eventually, then that will become standard of care.
The problem is you got to have a trained person who understands what to do and how to do it and the strategy behind it. Like they had a German trial over there, the Ergo trial, European, and the patients are sitting there eating tubs of lard. This is nuts. And they said, oh, it didn't work so well. A lot of these people were not compliant. Well, who the hell would sit down and eat a tub of lard and be compliant about it? You don't. We can do Mediterranean diets. We can do pescatarian, carnivore diet. All of these diets can be manufactured to give you a low glucose ketone index. Culturally appropriate, religiously appropriate diets can all be made to bring a low GKI. People always ask me, can I eat this? Can I have no idea. What does it do to your GKI?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And then you'll know what you can and cannot eat. And that could vary from one person to the next.
And the
So
GKI, if somebody's listening right now and they have cancer and their GKI, they get a glucose meter, they get a ketone meter, what are they shooting for?
yeah, they're shooting for 2.0 or below. And then a lot of people say to me, not a lot, many people come back. Don't forget, I'm not a physician. I can't tell anybody what to do or what not to do.
Correct.
All
Yeah.
all I can do is give them the literature and the scientific information they have to work
What you
out.
guys have shown. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So they say, oh, I got my GKI down, and a lot of them start to say, oh, the tumors are, but yes, the tumors grow slower. Yes, but they're not always gone. But you start to slow the whole process down. When you're in that zone, now you would come in with the glutamine targeting drugs, and nobody's doing that. That's the problem. So if they get great, they work hard, they're battling this another thing. When you do metabolic therapy, the burden of success rides on your shoulders. You're not sitting there as some bystander with somebody's poisoning and irradiating you. You're actually taking charge of your existence by fighting to get your GKI down. And a lot of people do that, and then they say, okay, what next? Well, now you can actually take lower doses of chemo, and you can take small doses of radiation. All these things will work a lot better. But the darn physicians don't know that. They give you the high dose already. Again, it's like the blind leading the blind in this whole thing right now.
Yeah, because that's the tools they got. That's what they got to do, and then they don't do that. If they don't do that, they're ostracized. Their licenses are taken away if they don't do that. And so
we're not telling them not to do that. We're just telling them to adjust the concentration,
exactly,
the timing in a little different way based on the success of the person's physiology as the response of his into this new metabolic state. Yeah. And again, but if you're sitting there thinking that cancer is a genetic disease, and you were trained in medical school, and you read textbooks and all these biology books, cancer is a genetic disease, all this genetics, you're not thinking about any of this stuff I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So your brain, you're indoctrinated on a different view of what cancer is. Right. Cancer is a mitochondrial metabolic disease, clearly.
Yeah.
And the mutations that you see in cancer are downstream effects of the abnormal energy metabolism of the mitochondria. So we know that.
When we shoot for a GKA of 1.1, you said?
2.0
2.0. What is that? That means the body's using more ketones than sugar for energy.
Yeah, it pretty much, yes. So you're now don't forget, in your body, the biggest consumers of sugar is the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Brain has a rapacious appetite for sugar. And muscles. So when you exercise, you're taking sugar out of your bloodstream to burn the muscles, and your brain is always going to have an open on the sugar. Okay, but if I'm lowering my GKI, I'm lowering blood sugar. My brain and exercising. If I exercise and have a low GKI, the last group of cells to get the sugar are the tumor cells.
Right.
So they're going to get hammered because the other cells in the body are now craving that same fuel that the tumor cell absolutely has to have to survive. But our muscles and our brain are going to be taking it. Now, if you're type 2 diabetic and you have blood sugars that are really high, the tumor is always fat and happy. The tumor cells are going to be extremely happy in that environment.
And that's why you can see with type 2 diabetics, their cancer rates are off the charts compared to anybody else. That's been proven and shown. And so then the blood sugar, you're targeting what, 70, 80? Well,
we can get down 70. You can get down into 70 milligrams per deciliter. Then we convert that over to millimole. It's about 3.5, somewhere in that area. So, and the ketones jump up to about 2.5, 3. Blood sugar about so you get almost unity for sugar and ketones. And don't forget, the normal cells are switching over to the ketone bodies because the brain and the muscles are gotta have most of it. The muscle does not share sugar with other organs because that's an evolutionary. You have to understand evolutionary biology. We evolved to escape from predators. So if my muscles are sharing glucose with the brain and everything else, the lion is coming. I have no energy to run away from him. So the muscles must keep the sugar to run away from the lion or the bear or whatever they're going to chase.
Yeah, they've done some beautiful studies on glucose receptor expression in muscle
Yeah.
during fasting states, and the
Yeah.
muscle wins. Muscle wins.
Yeah.
So if
Oh,
there's
yeah.
sugar in the body and you're using
Yeah.
your muscles,
Okay.
muscle
Yeah.
muscle wins. Yeah.
That's biological evolution. You got to know about this stuff. And then people say to me, "Oh, I don't understand biological evolution." I said, "Do you understand the obesity epidemic? Have you not seen obese people walking around in our different cities? Those are the descendants of ancestors that lived in the Paleolithic period. During the Paleolithic period of our existence on the planet, which was like 100,000, 200,000 years ago, we were lean and mean, and we had no carbohydrate, highly processed carbohydrates, right? There was no Dunkin' Donuts and delicatessens around for the Paleolithic man. Where did he get his carbs from? He was mostly in nutritional ketosis. He killed and ate animals. Okay, so he was had a lot of exercise. You know how hard it is to track down and kill an elephant or a woolly mammoth or a deer. You have to use and then chop the hell out of this thing and eat it and all this. I mean, today we're sitting in traffic. We're looking at computers. We're eating donuts. We're getting fat, and we are evolved to store energy. We're that kind of we're a very active species.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, our technology has moved so much faster than our biology. So we have all these fat people walking around. And they are the descendants of people that survived the ice ages and survived famines and movements and all this. And now we have all the things that we never had in our existence. And we have type 2 diabetes. We have all these chronic diseases, dementia, cancer, all these kind of things. They're all related to a change from who we evolved to be and who we are today. This is not a mystery. So the obesity epidemic is evolution in action. You don't understand biological evolution, you understand the obesity epidemic, then that's evolution in action. And you got to know that. So all we're trying to do is when you go into nutritional ketosis, you're bringing yourself back into the state that you were in during the Paleolithic period, where energy metabolism is going to be maximized. Every cell in the body must justify its existence for being in that body. There's no room for the lame, the weak, the dysfunctional like a cancer cell. So you just have to use your body. The body is incredible healing machine if you give it the opportunity to heal. Right now, we're for cancer, you're poisoning people, radiating them, you're making the body weak. Cancer cells will survive, and then you give them all the sugar and the glutamine they need. Jeez, I expect 1,700 people a day dying from cancer. Not a mystery.
Not a mystery. And then the issue, and I mean, I see this coming through the hospital doors.
Some may call us a hospital.
Every day.
We transform medicine with the region's only level 1 trauma care.
Younger and younger, like you said. And like that's what I was asking you, the type of brain cancer, because the glioblastomas, I mean, they're just ruthless. Recently, young, very successful couple, 39 years old with 3 kids. I mean, just gone, And so
Yeah, well, it shouldn't have to be that way.
exactly. It shouldn't. From the
Well, we told the neuro-oncologist that the worst thing you can do for a brain cancer patient is irradiate them, especially for glioblastoma, because what it does is it frees up massive amounts of glucose and glutamine in the tumor microenvironment, and then they give high-dose steroids like dexamethasone to the brain cancer patient to reduce the inflammation, but that makes their sugar go through the roof. So we went through the mechanism and showed them why these GBM patients are all dying over a very. As a matter of fact, we published a paper showing they really haven't been very much advanced from 1926. So we really have in 1926, death from glioblastoma was 8 to 14 months. In 2024, it's 8 to 17 months. So we have made no advance in glioblastoma in almost 100 years.
No, yeah, and even with like at UCLA, they started the trial with vaccine. So they take the tumor, they make a vaccine out of it, and put it back. And you're right.
It's absurd. It's absurd. Those people should have their head examined. The damn tumor cells can't live without glucose and glutamine. How is the vaccine going to target the glucose and glutamine? If the vaccine does a good job in taking away glucose and glutamine, it might be successful. But a vaccine can also cause more inflammation, driving in more glucose and glutamine to the microenvironment. I don't know what's wrong with people. As everything that I've just told you today, I might as well be speaking in some foreign language. For anyone to think that I'm going to take a vaccine and I'm going to get the kind of therapeutic benefit that you should be is nuts.
No, because it's like It's like taking the car, like you don't fuel your car or you don't charge your car. It's dead. And
Yeah.
so is the source of the ability of the cancer cells to be able to reproduce, is the root of it, you
Yeah, where they
know?
get their energy from. You can't grow
Yeah.
without energy. And they're very limited in how they get energy. They can't get anything from glucose and only that. So pull the plug on those fuels and you'll kill the tumor cells. And yet you go in for a vaccine. I'm going to radiate you. I'm going to do this. I'm doing. I said, what the hell, man? Don't you read the scientific literature? You should understand what's going on.
So do you think that this is what happened like with Dr. Ornish when he did his heart failure program? I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. These patients end stage heart failure patients, very sick. He took them to those 20 years ago, took them to this process, very strict diet, very strict exercise regimen, all of this. Ejection fraction in the heart improves, atherosclerosis in the vessels themselves improve. But then what happened is that they started seeing prostate cancer markers drop.
Yeah.
And so and I mean, and the pictures are incredible. And I think from their perspective, it was more an epigenetic, they didn't go down all the way the level in their papers down to glucose and glutamine. That might have been the mechanism by which this low carbohydrate, low fat diet ended up dropping these people's prostate cancer's markers down. Is probably the same
Well, a lot of
you're
it's
doing, right?
a lot of it is overlapping. You have to look at all these physiological markers, and you begin to see commonalities in the way these things work. So I mean, I know. And then when you say low fat diet, usually low fat means high carbs.
And not
But
in this case. It's like a super strict
yeah,
vegan
yeah, yeah,
diet. They
yeah, yeah.
measure
Yeah, well, carnivore,
carbohydrates. Yeah.
we've seen, anything that can lower the glucose ketone index. You can do it as a vegetarian, a Mediterranean, a
Exactly.
pescatarian, a carnivore. So it's whatever that person wants to do. We seem to find it work better with carnivore. Not to
Right.
say that people, meat's bad for you. Well, if you eat crap meat that's all artificially produced and full of
Right.
hormones and
Right.
all this other stuff, then maybe it isn't the best thing. But
Right.
our ancestors weren't eating highly processed, hormonally driven cows and elephants that they ate. They were eating what? They were eating organic animals, right? So,
Yes.
but yeah, the whole thing has to be reevaluated in light of biological evolution. Nothing makes sense except in the light of evolution. If people don't understand that, then they are susceptible to quackery, and
Yeah.
we understand that real well. And when you understand that, then you can design things that really work and has a solid scientific platform.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're scratching around. You don't know what you're doing.
And so what's next for you? How do you see this process? Or what is exciting to you right now? And what do you think you're going to be working in the next years or so?
Well, we're going to go through all the major cancers to show that they're all similar in their ability to get energy from glucose and glutamine, and perfecting dosage, timing, and scheduling, so we can translate it immediately over to the clinics. So we're again perfecting dosage, timing, and scheduling. Also looking more carefully at the two pathways that are driving the metabolic, we call it substrate level phosphorylation, which is energy without oxygen. We're looking at the mechanisms by which we can improve that, testing different tumors with different drugs and diets for sure, and trying to perfect this whole thing to make it as seamless as possible so
Yeah.
that it can be immediately translated over into the clinics, and then write case reports on human beings, more preclinical studies, linking preclinical studies with outcome in clinics. It's a work in progress.
Mhm.
And eventually the weight of the evidence is going to be so overwhelming
Mhm.
and then they're going to say, oh, this was obvious all the time. No, it
Right.
wasn't.
Right.
No, it wasn't. You guys didn't know anything about glutamine fermentation. We showed that.
Right.
Okay. And
Right.
we were the one who resurrected Otto Warburg and showed where he made mistakes, where he was correct, and where he was not correct. So
Yeah.
we're just building it. You have to do. That's the way science works. And there's a lot of resistance to things that are disturb disruptive technologies
Yeah.
changing the status quo.
Yeah.
People are very comfortable and happy in what they're doing, except
Yeah.
everybody except the cancer patients.
Yeah.
So we're going to change. All that'll change. All that'll
Yeah,
change.
yeah, it's interesting because I mean you see that with the intensive cardiac rehab programs that Dr. Ornish put in place, it was the same. Oh,
Yeah.
this is all BS,
Mm.
and then it's like, oh wait, if the patients are in this program, they don't come to the hospital as much. So maybe
Yeah.
we should start. So Medicare start
Well,
looking at it, and so it seems like the same thing should happen where the patients that are in this program don't come to the hospital as much, they get better as much, and then Medicare will end up having to pay for it because it's just better medicine and the cost is lower too, you know?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. So you're going to start to see things just like this, but also that you have to realize that people in general, human nature is I want the easy way out. I don't want to have to exercise. I don't want to have to not eat a big donut. I don't want to have to do that. So that's why we have Ozempic and we have all of these new drugs that people would rather take than do the exercise. Okay. But actually, that stuff will get your GKI down too.
That's what I was about to tell you because I mean, essentially, the GLP-1s are just making you fast and making you have a caloric restriction because they make your brain think you're full. You know what I mean?
Exactly the same. Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. You take a drug to make, if you have no personal discipline, you can take this drug and we'll do the same. Yeah, it's hard to get hungry when you feel nauseated all the time.
Right.
Chemo does that too. You want to lose weight, take chemo. Makes you sick. Yeah, and they're always concerned about how healthy your microbiome is. Your microbiome, you're right, microbiome. Everybody loves to talk about the microbiome. A billion different bacteria in your gut, all doing different kinds of things. Going to make you, you're not going to be the next genius on the planet. But then you take somebody and you give them radiation and chemo, and it destroys their whole microbiome.
And that's the other thing that I was going to ask you and your thoughts on it because in a lot of the functional medicine microbiome practices, they use glutamine a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's the double-edged sword of glutamine. Glutamine helps your gut and it helps your immune system, but it also helps the cancer cell. That's why you have to pulse it. You have to pulse it. You want to maintain the power of glutamine to help you, but at the same time, you want to make sure that it's targeting the tumor cell that needs the same fuel that the gut and the immune system need. That's the beauty of what we're doing.
And so, in essence, you think that we could go because I know you've mentioned before that that there was a study that was done in Africa and there was no cancers, right, in certain areas or certain communities. In essence, what your research is showing us is that there is a future where, with very early detection and metabolic therapy, the push and the pulse, we could really, really dialed in into somebody in their 30s before these things become bigger and really kind of change the trajectory of their lives.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's one thing that's nice about metabolic therapy. Not only does it come to play with you have pharmacy and metabolic therapy to manage cancer, but with a very slight modification, you can also prevent cancer because cancer arises from chronic damage to mitochondria with compensatory fermentation. If you keep your mitochondria healthy, it's very, very difficult to get cancer in the first place. And exercise and the types of diets and things that keep you with a low GK. That's why we built the GKI, glucose ketone index calculator, here at Boston College, predominantly for cancer people. But it turns out like young guys like yourself and all these guys that want to be healthy, they're all looking at their GKI. I got a low GKI. I'm super healthy, man. I'm like a Paleolithic man. Well, you ain't going to get cancer.
Hey, but that's where the shift has to happen. And then if we can start grabbing people when they're very early on in their disease, with all this amazing technology that we have, I mean, the Grail test and full body MRIs and things like that, and then we can focus on the GKI and push.
But obviously we got a obesity epidemic. These guys aren't looking at their GKI.
No.
You got all these problems. So, but that's because it's education. Education to come into the society and know that to prevent cancer, you got to keep your mitochondria healthy. You have to exercise. You have to eat the right foods. You got to keep a lower GKI. You can't. And this has to be. And some of the folks that are in the poor socioeconomic groups, they don't have any of this access. They don't have any knowledge. They need to know this stuff to keep themselves healthy.
Yeah.
And listen, they'll do it if they know about it, know what to do, and
Yeah.
they have a tool because the GKI you can put it on your cell phone, and now they have free Libra glucose meters. It's attached to your cell phone. All this technology, as you said, it's there. It's just that we have to start using it in the right way, and then
Yeah.
things change. You know. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having a conversation with us today. I mean, this is just really exciting, and it's really cool to understand that somebody's actually getting to the intricacies and the
yeah,
commonalities of what cancer is. Because it's been this vague thing for so many years. And I feel like your group and your team are beginning to understand and to shed light on that. And that transparency over the years is going to provide so much help for the world, you know?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's what's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just
Yeah,
we're the tip of the spear on this whole thing.
exactly.
And they'll all come to know it sooner but we're still hard to science, get the science, get
Yeah,
the science, get the
that's,
science. And
yeah,
that's what we do. That's what we do.
that's
So
it. Dr. Seyfried, and somebody wants to, the name of your book was,
yeah, it's cancer as a mitochondrial. People get angry at me. They say, um, how come you charge so much money for this book? It's a John Wiley Press. John Wiley Press. And I only wrote a book, this one. There's other people out there saying I wrote this and I wrote that, these scammers and things. I didn't. This is the only book that I wrote. And all of our funding comes from philanthropy and private foundations.
and the way I
So
see it, I mean, and the way I see it is that if somebody's selling me a bottle of water in the desert, like it's okay. And if they have to work so hard to get it, like why don't I pay? Why don't I want to pay? Like, or if my friend owns a restaurant, why don't I want to pay him double for the meal? Like, you know what I mean?
I know.
To
I
add the value of your life's work. I think the people who are like making these comments, they just don't understand the amount of work and diligence and heartache that it takes to push something like this out to be able to create like a paradigm shift in the world. And so, I mean, the book is the price is nothing to the value that it adds, you know?
and the new papers that we have support what the book was saying. So, and that's free.
Yeah.
That's open access on the. You have a computer, put my name in, you can get all the papers that we're publishing. And
Yeah.
we have our own YouTube site now. It's called Talking Cancer with Professor Seyfried. And then I answer questions and
Awesome.
people write in and I have to be honest, you have to kind of break it down smaller and smaller bits. A lot of people say, "Oh, what about the diet? How do I get rid of glutamine? Blah blah blah, and all this kind of stuff." You got to realize they have to understand press pulse. I try to do my best in bringing the science to a level that the most common guys can understand. And
Hmm.
believe me, that's a challenge. Because on the other hand, I got to talk to the professionals in the field that understand all the biochemistry, and we talk on that level. But then we have to talk on the level for the guy the layperson. He
Right.
wants to know about this. What can he do, and
Right.
how can he help himself? And we try to help him do that. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it has to be the conversation between the layperson and the knowledgeable physician, and they work together as a team. The
Mhm.
problem now is that in the field of oncology, uh, that knowledge base is not there, and that's one of the great tragedies. Like if you do orthopedics, they have tremendous advances in orthopedic surgery and all this, and cardiovascular surgery, and some parts of medicine have just skyrocketed in their sophistication. But oncology is still stuck in the Stone Age. They just don't understand what's going on. Or I don't know if they don't want to understand it, they just don't understand it. But they're going to have to come to understand because cancer is killing more and more people every year.
Right. I think they understand from a downstream effect in the technology, proton therapy, things like that. The surgeries are getting better, but the upstream effect, the root of it, I think
Yeah.
is very blind, and it's a
Yeah.
big blind spot that
Well,
you're
I mean,
that you're
the
shedding
bottom
light
line,
into.
yeah, well, the bottom line is you got all those dead people coming in. I mean, that tells you whether you know what's going on or not. If you have 1,700 people a day dying at 70 an hour, there's something wrong here. You can't tell me that we're doing great work on cancer when we got 70 people dying per hour in the United States from cancer. Something wrong. There's no progress. No significant progress and drop in the death rate. Yes, we have isolated success stories, but the majority of people aren't benefiting from that. And that has to be recognized because we can drop that death rate significantly if metabolic therapy moves into this space.
That's exciting times. I'm looking forward to seeing how your work goes in the next couple of years, and I'll be tracking definitely.
Check out our big paper that we just published with Dr. Duryea, one of my colleagues next door, Thomas Duryea, MD, PhD. He's the first author on the big glioblastoma treatment protocol paper. Already, it's one of the top viewed papers. So you read it, look at it, and say, "Oh, okay, I could do it. You're an MD. I could do all this. I could do this."
Yeah.
You know?
And we see these glioblastoma patients, and it's just
Yeah.
brutal. It is gut-wrenching brutal.
Well, we want to stop that. We want to put a cap
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
So, and that's our goal. That's our goal.
That's awesome. All right, Dr. Seyfried, thank you so much, and you have a great day out there.
Yeah, you too. And thank you very much for the conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you.